Alrighty, welcome back, Survivor Indianapolis fans, and we're gonna get into what we're gonna call the Survivor Indianapolis Season 5 Advantage Island Finale preview. And it might be a dirty word for some of you. They're like, "Hey, where's the finale?" Um, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Life is just getting in the way of editing. As we speak right now, I am probably like a third of the way through editing it, and obviously this is being recorded several days before it's going to come out. But I could just see the not light at the end of the tunnel, but the problem at the end of the tunnel that we are not going to have time to get this done by Sunday. Between what my edits are and then what you're going to touch up and clean up how you usually do for the episodes. It's not going to happen. I have my birthday this weekend. I got plans Friday night. I got plans Saturday. Got plans Saturday night. Then, we have church Sunday, and I can edit Sunday, but I cannot edit enough to get it to you and then have you finish. So it's not going to happen. So the finale will be coming a week late. Sorry about that, but that's just the way it's going to be. And I think that you'll be fine.
Yeah, and hey, the thing is, we're giving you some content here in
Mm,
place of that. So,
yes.
you won't get your recap show, but you're going to get a preview show here this week, and then of course we'll have the finale for you guys on Sunday. So it's going to be a blast. We're definitely going to make sure that you guys get to see who wins this whole thing if you don't already know. So it is a lot to look forward to here because I think all four players right now in the game have a pathway to winning this thing and becoming the sole survivor of Survivor Advantage Island.
I totally agree. So we're going to break down a few different topics, and I think that like a couple of these we've kind of talked about how should we break this down? What should we talk about? What's interesting to focus on with our final four here? We have this best class alliance that has gotten to the end together, and now the problem for them is there's still one more person to eliminate. However, that is a really interesting proposition for those of us that have been paying attention throughout the season. So let's start talking about I think the easiest place to start and probably the quickest conversation is a little bit of a combo of who is the biggest threat out of these four to win the game and why. And do we think that like the jury feels the same way? Do we think the jury will like be excited about this person over that person getting remaining into the final three? So I'll let you hop on this one first. I don't think this will be a complicated conversation. But what do you think about this?
Yeah, I think I got to go back to the guy that just won the last two individual immunity challenges, the one that's probably been the loudest this entire season in terms of just letting his presence be known, and that is Chris. I think Chris is the front runner out of these four to win the game, and I think the jury is probably going to see it more that way just because he has been putting on a show for them. He hasn't had a quiet game, but even in the quiet, he's done some stuff strategically. We've seen the last couple of weeks where he's telling people, hey, vote this way, vote that way, and they're following order. And so, they're falling in line with what he's telling them to do. So those players are now are members of the jury, and they're like, man, he got me good, maybe. Or they're like, okay, I gotta respect him because he went this way, he zigged while I zagged, and that's why I'm out, and that's why he's in. So I think honestly, like I hate to say it, but if you look at everybody else's resume from social strategy and challenges, I think Chris is your front runner.
Yeah, I think if it's the final four, there's one potential thing that could trip Chris up. But if it was a final four, which obviously it's not, I think Chris should win if you look objectively at the game that he played. Now, the one potential thing, bitter jury. It's always a possibility. Um, in our game, it's a 1 day game. It's quick. It's hot and heavy. It's like, and we've seen it in the past. We've seen. I don't think I have to go back through and like really look through it, but off the top of my head, I don't feel like we've ever had a bitter jury decide the outcome of a game. I think we've had bitter jurors be a factor. You could argue the very first season. I don't know if any of the people that were part of that will be listening to this, but you could argue the very first season was decided by a bitter jury. but that was also amongst a pretty unique thing that we do here, was the most unique because it was the very beginning of what we do here. It was very different in some ways. Um, I wasn't sure that I wasn't starting that first season with the intention of creating some yearly thing. I was doing it for like, it sounds like fun. Let's see what happens. Let's see if I can pull it off. So it was the vast majority of the people were like my family members and cousins, my wife and her brother and his wife and like and her cousins and my cousins and like just tons of family. I think there were technically four people that were not family that were a part of the game. One of them did not show up, and they didn't really say anything about, like, they didn't give me a heads up, hey, I can't make it. So I was like, well, in case they do come, I let that person's tribe vote them off. Just like in case they show up, I can just say like, sorry, tribe voted you off. Um, which I probably shouldn't have done, but whatever. And then the other three people that were not family, uh, three of those four total were the siblings whose house we were at. Like their parents owned the property in the house that we were at the first time. So it was like made sense why I asked them to play. And then the fourth person was John Crabtree, who you've been around the Survivor Indianapolis Facebook or Instagram, Facebook or YouTube channel, you've seen John Crabtree on videos and stuff like that all the time. So no surprise that he was a part of that. My point is that season maybe could have been a little bit more salty because of the tighter connections, generally speaking. A lot of cousins, a lot of siblings there, all the Stafford siblings, um, Stacy's siblings and cousins. It was just a lot of connections, and so I think it was a lot easier opportunity for hurt feelings. Do you feel like there was any season where a bitter, like any ones that you've seen or the one that you played in, that a bitter jury decided who won?
I would say not particularly. I would say probably my season was the closest if
I would
I'm
agree.
going off the jury because some people like and I'm not trying to be mean, but in
Hmm.
that scenario, right? I think we ended up having 11 votes and it was a
It was, it was,
4-4-3 tie.
yes, it
And the
was
three votes for Jacob
Jacob.
were basically just bitter people that didn't really understand. And I'm not trying to be mean, they just didn't understand like how the game was being played. And I was bitter when I voted. I won't lie.
Sure.
I was bitter yet trying to make something up, but I was just like, man, Chris was the one that spearheaded getting me out of the game, so I didn't want to vote for him to win.
Twice.
Yes. Well, pretty much the whole time I was in the game.
Yeah.
He wanted me out. And I knew Jacob was just kind of following along. And Michael, he wanted to make a big move. I screwed up, didn't vote with him and Caleb. We could have got Chris out at 5. So I think I felt like I owed it to Michael to give him my vote. But I think in that one it was Chris probably was the right winner out of the three because he was the leader of that alliance and he was able to take that alliance all the way to the final three. And he won the immunity challenges when he needed to. So, looking back on it now as an experienced player now and someone that's really dove into Survivor before, then I wasn't
Sure.
as knowledgeable. But I just think that group was definitely more bitter, and everyone pretty much stayed around, I think, till the very end to vote. We have
A
had
couple
some
of
other.
people, Caleb
They had
and
to leave like right
Brooke
after because they're
had
dogs, but
to
they left their
had
votes,
no,
right?
they left before. Yeah, when they left several rounds before, they didn't leave, so like
They
they
left
didn't even
after
know.
final five.
So that's what I'm saying. They did not know who was in the final three yet, so they
Yeah, so
cast
they gave
votes
their.
based off of. I shouldn't let them do that, honestly, but I don't think it changed the outcome of the game. Uh, like they basically were like, if here are the five people that I want to vote for in from one to five, and so whoever's left in the game at the highest spot on my list gives them
Yeah,
my
I think it
vote.
was four only because Caleb was at 5.
Oh,
Caleb
he
was
was
the one
five
out
and
of
you were
5, so
four.
it's just final four is the
I couldn't
last
remember.
round.
I couldn't remember if you were five and he was four or vice versa. So
Yeah, he got
okay,
out before me because I voted for him like an idiot. But
that's
um,
fine.
But anyway, that was a really dumb move. I would say the next time we played, we definitely had some very bitter jury members, but they left the game immediately after being voted out. So
Sure, they didn't vote for the
yeah,
for
so they
the
didn't impact it, but there was definitely some bitterness there that carried over
sure
after the game. So,
sure
that was not fun. But that's what happens when we get people that know each other. And this
yeah
game is kind of like a backstabbing game, and you have to just kind of go into it knowing it. But I think this is probably the nicest group out of everybody in terms
yeah.
of like,
It's hard to know for sure yet before we've seen what happens. But I
yeah.
think and I think last season was better too. So it's like was
But just
not
go back
better.
to the
So
Drew
they were a
vote
little bit
out.
better.
I mean, just go back to the
Yeah,
Drew vote out. Like the dude's
yeah,
fist bumping everybody as he gets
yeah.
voted out. Like I haven't
I
seen
don't
that
s-
ever in
I don't
this
see Drew being bitter, but there are other people. Maybe is a Bailey bitter at
her
Leah.
tribe. Yeah.
Like
I've seen people
there's
get
you can see
voted out
some
early do that.
potential. You can see some potential for that. That's all I'm saying. And we don't know at this point in the footage that we've aired. Um, and I think that in your situation with Michael, I don't think that I would count that purely as a bitter vote because if anyone deserves to be bitter, it's the person that got voted off in fourth place, and you voted for somebody who was like wanting to work with you. So you had good like that's a good social move by Michael. So whatever. My point is basically, that's the only thing I can see tripping up Chris, and we talked forever about that. I didn't intend for that to happen, but right now he's the front runner. I totally agree. I think it would take either a bitter jury or him just absolutely flubbing Final Tribal Council, which, given what we've seen in confessionals, it doesn't seem likely. He's a pretty smooth operator and all that stuff, and I think he would be able to speak to his game pretty well. So, with that out of the way, do we want to talk about each person's? I think we should talk about each person's like resume, so to speak.
Yeah.
Like, what are the things that would um, lead a jury to vote for them? What are the moves that have gotten them here? Um, and then we can go back to talking about what we think might happen based off of the alliances, because there's several different options there as well. So
Yeah.
let's just go alphabetical order. Let's go Adrian. What do you think is Adrian's case if she's in the final three to win the game?
Okay. I don't believe she's won any individual immunity so far.
But that could be she means she won the individual getting back into the game.
Okay, that's fair. She did
So
get
I'm
back
not.
into the game, so she won the returning player challenge for the female.
So she
Uh,
has the underdog story.
yeah, so she has that, but the only reason she was eliminated in the first place is because of Drew's idol play. So I think that makes her a strong candidate because she's always kind of been in the popular side of things. She's been in the right alliances to get to this point. So I think that shows how good she's been socially. And then strategically, she's done a good job of not allowing things to kind of come back. Like, for example, like when Chris said, "Hey, I'm going to use you as a vote, like as a decoy vote," she didn't allow that to, upset her and kind of like become emotional and try to like
Hmm.
flip now because, oh, Chris is throwing my name out there. Does that mean
Yeah.
he could actually be targeting me? Like she just was kind of cool with it. She kind of let Annie take the charge a little bit when they were trying to blindside Drew and before not convinced Drew not to play his idol. So she kind of let Annie spearhead that instead of making that her move, right? I think she's just done a good job of trying to stay low key. She's been competitive in the challenges too. Like she's been very close to finishing. I think she was close in the last two, really. The
Both the last two, yeah, both
the
because
puzzle.
you can hear John say Adrian's got it like right
Yeah.
after Chris finished, and then last week you could hear, I think it might have been Julie saying that Adrian was close. It wasn't as close as what it made it maybe sounded in the moment, but she was the closest to Chris.
Yeah. No, I agree. So she's played a good game. I mean, she has, but at the
Yeah,
same time, I don't think she's done enough to kind of showcase it all. And so maybe she'll do a better job of explaining that here if she does make it to the final three. But I
yeah.
just haven't seen enough from the footage to really showcase where she's like stood out compared to maybe Chris in terms of like the game that she's played because she's kind of almost been like a follower that's been like, all right, basically anybody but me, I'm cool with. But she's
Hmm.
also been very smart to know what alliances to align with.
Yeah, she knows what's going on most of the time. I think she voted wrong when Annie got voted off. That might have been intentional, just because she didn't
Yeah.
want to vote Annie out. I don't know that for a fact. But other than that, I think she voted the right way pretty much every time. And like you said, when she got voted off, it was like if Drew didn't have an idol, that wouldn't have happened. So Drew played it really well, obviously, played it perfectly, just based off of just being able to like cancel all the votes other than his.
Yeah.
Um, and so that shouldn't be held against her, I don't think too much. At least not against you. If you're her, that could be the only way you have a leg up on Chris, where you're like, well, sure, Chris played a good game, but he got voted off like by a lot of people. Like
True.
I got voted off by one vote, you know. And so if that means something to some of the jury members in terms of like, do I care about voting for somebody who got voted off, was not in the game for X amount of time, um, that's definitely a benefit. Just sit and chill for a little bit and take a break. And if I was on a jury, I would have to weigh that into consideration and hold that against. I would if I was on a jury, I would hold it against somebody. I'm not saying that I would not vote for somebody. Like if I was on this jury, I would vote for Chris in spite of the fact that he got some time off to rest and relax because the game has been that good, in my opinion.
Yeah.
However, if he was out, um, Adrian was out for a long time, but she got voted off just by one vote. So it's like a narrow defeat instead of it being this huge, like, you've messed up, you're too big of a threat, popped up to the top too early and your tribe voted you off, or the merge tribe voted you off, or whatever. The thing you can hold against her, I guess, is that she really did not know how to maneuver around Drew a couple different times, where it was like, well, we're just gonna vote for him and hope he doesn't play the idol. But like you didn't do much work to make him feel comfortable in that situation. And then there was some stuff later with like the situations around like Eli and Drew and Chris, and not Chris, Eli and Drew, like, and Cameron, with them having a couple different advantages and like opportunities to potentially, and those boys misplayed that a little bit. If they had played it better, that may have ended up biting Adrian in the butt a little bit. I feel like that group of girls, Annie, Adrian, and Leah specifically, could have done better a couple different times at playing around the advantages and kind of like working that out better.
Yeah.
And because of the fact that Annie's not here, and that could also fall on Leah's shoulders as well if she's in the final three. But if she's not, then that might fall more on Adrian. But let's go ahead and move on to Chris then, I guess. So his case, I think, is pretty straightforward. He's won several immunities. He wants to play back into the game. He is someone that, like, just standing there with the tribe all lined up is one of the top people you would say that guy's a threat. Just looking at him, just his personality can come through without him even saying anything hardly. Clearly charismatic. He did things intentionally to try to bring down his threat level early in the game, and it didn't really work. And then he got voted off, and then came back into the game and was like, okay, I'm gonna go all out, and he's done that. He has controlled basically every vote, maybe not even basically, maybe actually every vote since he came back. And that's a pretty straightforward open and shut case to me, is like, sure, he got voted off. But for what, if he gets through next week from 4 to 3, it'll have been 5 rounds, right? That he
Mhm.
was a part of the, no, because it was 10, right? It went down to 8, or did it go down to 6
I went down
and
to
back up?
6. You brought two
So it
back.
was 5 rounds. So 5 rounds, you had to either win 5 immunities or uh, control the vote, and he did a little bit of both. So to me, it's like, well, I don't know, you can't nitpick too much outside of you did get voted off.
Yeah, and I think that's fair. But I kind of want to throw this question at you too, because if this was a game where people weren't worried about winning challenges as a tribe, do you think Chris would have been a first boot for his tribe? Because we heard Moretta talking about, I'm gonna not work with Chris. I'm gonna vote him off eventually. I know he's such a threat. And when you look at the tribe dynamics, right? Because like you need a strong player like Chris early on in the rounds because you want to win immunity for your tribe. But if you weren't worried about that and you were just worried about strategy, he might have been a first boot. And he even said openly in his first
Yeah,
confessionals, first episode, yeah, I might even just get out of this game early, go relax, go
and
sit in
come
my
back in.
hammock, and then come back into the game. So it might have been part of his strategy to not be this great, player strategically early on because he had a plan to come back into the game. Now, I mean, that's a risky move, and it's probably not the
Super,
smartest thing.
super risky.
Yeah, like to
It's like
say
a
like
one
I
in
don't really
five or
care.
six that you get back in the game.
Yeah, to say, and the thing is, like, if maybe you hadn't told them they were going to get back in, he would have played it differently. But by letting them
Sure.
know, because you're being very transparent, like, hey, if you do get voted out early, we'll have an opportunity for you to get back into the game because we want to make sure you guys get the most bang for your buck by being here, giving up your entire Saturday. So, I mean, I get why you tell them that because you want to encourage them to play.
And
But
stay.
yes, stay. That's a big thing and be part of the jury. So, I just it's a bit of a bummer, honestly, just because, if he doesn't know that, like how much different does he play? And it's just like there's a lot of strategy that goes in here. So just throwing that question at you though, the first one I did, because if he wasn't such a threat, strategically, and they didn't need him for the challenges, do you think he would have been an earlier boot?
Yeah, I think that, like, you could see a world where, obviously I did not do this because of their brother connection, but if they were not brothers, let's just say you swap Mason and Eli on the starting tribes, I think Chris could be gone. Like, I think the only reason why Eli was super loyal to Neil and Drew was that they both came across as and played super loyal games.
Hmm.
Chris immediately was trying to be like, "Oh, I don't have a strategy," but you could see him. He goes and talks to Moretta instantly about getting Mason out in episode 1, and then he goes and talks to the whole group about just throwing Anna under the bus because she was out at Advantage Island. And he's already like just throwing people's names out right at the beginning. That's the kind of thing that could get you in trouble. It could put people, could put your name on the radar. It's like, oh, you're playing really hard, you're throwing names out. And I think that like people like Cameron and Eli and like Seth maybe even are the kind of players that I don't think they would be like if I was in the game, I would be looking for people that would be strategic and physical shields for me to hide behind. So I would want to keep Chris around, and you probably
Same,
would too.
same for me.
But a player like Cameron and Eli, and probably even Seth, and the women especially like Moretta, have really no reason to do that. They don't
No,
need that shield. So like I could see a world where he gets voted off early.
yeah.
So it
I
just
think it's just
depends.
optional based on who's on the tribe with him,
It
right?
just
Like
depends. Yeah, it just
that's
depends
a
on
fair
the
way to put it.
personalities. That's why playing to your tribe and to your cast is super important. You can't just come in and be like, I'm gonna play this way, and it's gonna work. Like you have to play to the people that you're with and what they need for you to get through every
Yeah.
round. So I do think it could be a chance of that. It's pretty hypothetical. Obviously, like Mason was very much against doing it early because he wanted to win challenges. I think he wanted to get Chris out, but he just didn't want to do it early, and that was part of his mistake. But
Mhm.
um, anything else on Chris before we move on to
No, we talked about it earlier too with why we thought he
yeah,
was the front runner. So
sure. Okay, so let's get on to Leah then. Do you want to take Leah first?
I mean, I think that you probably have a little bit more insight because of the editing you've done and all the film that
I
you've
can do that. Yeah,
cut, right? So you've cut a lot of footage. So
sure.
you have seen how she's worked strategically, and I think that's kind of what's been her biggest strength in this game.
Yeah, I can't think of a good one-to-one to a real Survivor player, but she feels like a real Survivor player. I haven't thought of the right person yet, but her pre-merge game and her early post-merge game feel like a real Survivor player. So she, without it being super obvious, like Eli is aware of it and he talks about it at some point after the swap. He tells they have the swap where it's Eli, Cameron, Neil, Sonya, and Chris, and he says to somebody on that was from original Shibwe, was Mason like your guys' ringleader because Leo was ours, uh, and like kind of insinuates that like Leo was kind of calling the shots. And the thing is, I think outside of Eli saying that, I don't think anyone else really was aware of it. I don't think any of the people that she was really close to were aware of it. But she was creating alliances specifically with the girls and using that to get her way and do what she wanted to do, and not in a way that was like, "Hey, let's do this." It was like very communal. Like it was not, "I'm going to tell you what to do," um, and that worked to her advantage. She was able to pick off whoever she wanted to basically every time in the pre-merge. And then in the post merge, she did the same thing. And the only time you could say maybe it wasn't intentional that she got her way was when Chris got voted off. But she was connected enough to know that was happening and smart enough to vote Chris out. And she got lucky that he came back in and then Adrian came back in, two of like her ally from her actual original starting tribe, Adrian, and Chris, her husband. So like you could say, well, you got lucky. Like okay, but there's a lot of luck in the game. There's a lot of luck in all this stuff. I mean, it's just how it goes. We talked about the episode from this week of Real Survivor and how there's luck involved in a couple things with that. It's just kind of how the game is. It's not like it's purely luck based, but there is always going to be an element of luck in a game like Survivor. So I wouldn't hold it against her. Um, I think that she's been savvy and smart, and then she is instrumental in this best class alliance. I think you should and could give most of the credit of that to Chris, but at this point in time, if Chris is gone, I'm looking at her as my front runner. I think right now, based off of what I have seen, she
Mm,
seems to be the one that's contemplating options more. She seems to be the one that is like Chris is worried about her voting him out, and Chris is not voting her out. Right? Chris is constantly worried about the girls voting him out, and he is making no moves against Leah.
yeah.
So to me, it's like part of that is maybe that's just part of their marriage, and I don't, whatever. But j- analyzing the gameplay, what that tells me is that she's in a better position in terms of her connections to the group than what he thinks he is, at least. So
Yeah, I mean, she's not playing a loud game, and I think that's the important thing.
no, no,
Not at all. But I mean, just one of the things that stands out to me is just you talked about it with that Siakam tribe, that dynamic she
Ooh,
had there.
yeah,
She got close with Annie, and Annie told her where the advantage was
she got that
in the
advantage, that idol.
pavers in the pavers challenge, and she gets her own idol, right? And Chris irate because he wanted to get that because he was out at Advantage Island with Annie to know where it was, and she just, she's a smart player. She ended up, hey, I mean, even if Annie hadn't told her, I guarantee Leah's smart enough that if she would have saw Annie flip that cone over to grab something, she would have done the
Probably,
exact
yeah,
same thing because she is smart like that. So
yeah.
she was definitely keeping an eye on things, and the players eventually knew that the advantages were hidden throughout the game. They just didn't know when they would be in the game. So she was constantly looking for that. And I remember when she came out to Advantage Island when we did, it was 11 players that did the tribe swap, and she had to go out there and do the perfect square puzzle. She couldn't get it, but she told me, I think it was off camera, maybe it was on camera, but I think it was off camera. She said, "Man, I was hoping I would have stayed out there because I knew exactly where that advantage was in the balance beam challenge." So
She did know.
yeah, so she was bummed about that. So she's very in the know of what's happening, what's going on. She's got a great pulse on who's in what alliance and what, she knows what buttons to push. I think that's the big thing here because when you're a player that has all this information and people keep funneling all this information to you, you can use it a lot of different ways. But she's been very quiet about it. She's been able to use those to her advantage and keep individuals that she wants close to her to make her alliances, but also she's not afraid. She's God bless you there, by the way, if you sneezed.
I
I
did,
don't know
but
if it was sneeze or a cough, you muted there,
I was
but
able to mute.
I
Luckily,
was laughing at
luckily
your
for
face. You're
everybody.
like trying to be like
I
sly
was
about it. It's
trying
like,
so
yeah, it's
hard.
it's it's on
I
camera,
mean,
but
they're gonna see it on the camera, but
yeah.
it
So
wasn't on audio. So,
yeah, it didn't hurt our ears, but we did see it if you're watching on YouTube. So
oh well.
um, but anyway, it's just I think Leah's played a really good game, and I feel
Hmm.
like her connection with Chris, the way that she kind of flipped from being against him, because I believe she was in the majority that voted him out originally.
She was. Yeah.
He comes back into the game. It kind of felt like she wasn't working with him like the entirety of that pre-merge, pre-returning player challenge part of the game. And then when he came back into the game, I think she realized, okay, I'm going to work with him now.
Yeah.
And they were strategizing whenever Chris threw that challenge to Cameron, right? In the sumo
Yeah.
challenge. And then pretty much since then, it's when it felt like when the best class alliance really started to form was then, even though Adrian wasn't a part of that vote, it felt like that was in the works. And I think that I mean, Chris was the one that was spearheading it, but like, hey, he pulled Leah in for their four, and I think that was really smart.
And I think you also, it'd be hard for me to say, is it 50-50 Chris Leah? Is it 60-40 Chris Leah, Leah Chris, whatever? But you do have to credit, I think, both of them for being a married couple in a game of total of 14 people and being able to make it to Final Four together. And no one was like, hey, maybe we should split up the married couple. Maybe we should vote off one of the two people who are married. And the fact that that did not happen, I think it is a credit to both of them playing good games and both of them being able to, whether intentionally or not, make it seem like there's a chance they could not work together at some point or could turn against each other at some point.
Yeah.
We saw Chris tell Sonya that he would gladly vote for Leah. You saw Chris being worried about Leah voting for him and the girls voting for him several times. And you do see like Leah voted him out. So like there's things that have been done, whether intentionally or not, and I think it's probably a mix of both. But there are things that happened that they both did that you could say led to them not being seen as a threat, which is what has been true in the past of whether married couples, brothers, things like that. There were like clear connections. So
Yeah.
that's good gameplay.
Yeah, for sure. Nothing else to add to that, by the way.
No, I think we're good. So then last but not least, Moretta. So give us the case for Moretta.
Okay. Couple things here that I think stand out to me from Moretta. Number one, she's never had her name written down for a vote. So that
It's
clearly
huge,
shows that she
huge.
is definitely in the know on the social side of things. And she is not viewed as a threat, even though I think she probably should have been a little bit more. When we had the tribe swap, right, it was her and Mason that got taken over to the Siakam tribe. And I think they actually stayed Shibwe, but I think they were blue, but it was her and
They
Mason were
stayed
on the
Shibwe,
bottom.
yeah.
And
Yes.
when it was an individual challenge within the tribe, she had to outlast everybody or she was going to get voted off. Like I think Drew even said, like, yeah, if you wouldn't have
He
won the
told her,
immunity
yeah.
necklace, I would have voted you out. Like she knew it was coming and she won that challenge. It was the axe throwing challenge. So she wins that. I think that's massive because without that, she goes out of the game. And who knows if she wins the returning player challenge. And then on top of that, the one thing that I thought was really interesting is during the food challenge, right? The wheel. She spins the question mark. She goes out to Advantage Island and she gets the opportunity to win an idol. Now she doesn't.
Yeah.
She gets a steal a vote. But what's crazy is when she comes back, not a single person asked her what happened at Advantage Island. They just let it be. She didn't have to explain anything. And she finally just revealed it last episode that she had one. She used it on the
Yeah.
very last round that she could have played it. Now she could have maybe done bigger moves with it. We criticized that potentially, but she
Sure.
hasn't needed to make any big moves. She hasn't needed to put this big radar on her. And I think that's a very strategic part of her game. So that to me is the three things that stand out to me.
Yeah, she's played a quieter game, kind of like what maybe an Erica you would say from 41. Not that that is undeserving of a victory. So, and in fact, some people prefer that to a big loud game. Um, it just depends on, what kind of a fan you are, what kind of a juror you might be. So, the thing about the steal a vote that she ends up having and using. We don't know. I don't believe she told anyone the truth that she had that. She says I haven't told anybody. And she says I'm gonna go tell Chris. And you see her tell Chris right before Tribal Council at Final Five. Um, we don't know because there's a couple of rounds there. That round and then the round either before or after it. I think it's the round after it. We have a lot of missing footage or a lot of dead mic footage. So I don't know if people asked her and she was able to dodge the question or people asked her and she lied. But either way, I don't believe that she told anyone the truth. And that's smart and that's good gameplay. And the fact that she either was A, able to totally avoid it, or B, able to lie her way out of it is a sign that she's good at the game and that people trust her. People see her and believe her and think she's loyal and faithful. And she is to certain people. She's very loyal to this best class alliance. And that's the biggest thing I would say as like a negative, right? Has never had her name written down. It's great. Shows you could argue that like maybe that group after the swap should have voted her out instead of Mason and used Mason as a shield. Like you could argue different things. Uh, but she's gotten here on her social game, mostly making alliances, making connections, um, and being right in the middle of the threat. Like if the threat level is a 0 to 10, where a 0 is like you're too low of a threat, and so you have no chance of winning, or you're gonna get voted off early because you're so bad at the game and you're so bad at challenges and yada yada yada, or you're a 10 and you're gonna get voted off, somewhere around the merge because you're too good at stuff, and as soon as you don't have the necklace, you're gone. She's been like a 5, 6, 4, 5, 6, 7. Like she'll peak up a little bit and win a challenge and then kind of calm back down, and it's not too dissimilar from Mike Gabler, my favorite Survivor winner of all time. Other than,
Alligabler, baby.
other than the fact that he did actually have like a big move in voting off Ellie that was just like so far before
10
the
rounds
ending,
before the finale.
so far before the finale. But whatever, he at least had a big move in the merge-ish
Yeah.
round. I
Yeah.
mean, not it isn't the merge yet though because you didn't get your buff, so you're not on the merge. Um, anyways, I'm
Did he lose his vote?
get off the soapbox. Uh, she does not have that signature like, oh, I voted off so and so. I led the charge against so and so. But again, I don't think you have to have that. I don't to the best of my knowledge, I don't think Erica had that. She just played a really solid game from start to finish. She had opportunities to get voted off, and she won timely immunities, and that's a good case at the end. Will it be enough to overcome the fact that Chris and Leah can both clearly, I think, can potentially more clearly point to specific people in the jury and say, I had to get you out because if I didn't, you were going to beat me. And this is how I did it. I was the person that did that. I don't think that Adrian or Moretta can, maybe they could try, But
Hmm.
from what we've seen in the game, it hasn't seemed like it was their decision or they're the ones gathering the votes. It seems more like it was Chris and then occasionally Leah that were, and Leah more so pre-merge and before Chris got back into the game. Once Chris is back into the game, it seems like to this point at least, it's been the Chris show for the last 4, 5, 6 rounds. So, and I'm here for it. It's been a lot of fun, but
Yeah.
that puts other people in the back seat a little bit more. And so that's the only reason why I would say maybe it's a tough draw for her at this point, for her and Adrian.
Yeah.
I mean, there's four of us here, and only one can win, and only one more is going out. So it is gonna be interesting to see what happens in the final three. So the last thing I think we should talk about is the different alliance breakdowns. So there's three different possible breakdowns, right? We know we have two original Sheboy, two original Siakam. You have Adrian and Leah who worked together the entire game. And you have Moretta and Chris who started off a little bit rocky, um, but they have worked together since Chris got back into the game, and targeted Siakam people like Annie. And Adrian, I don't think was in on that vote. I don't know if she
No.
was left out, or if she just didn't want to vote for Annie. It's not totally clear to me, but she could have been left out. So that shows some alliance, some allegiance to each other over Adrian. So you have that's the tribe breakdown. You have this best class alliance, which you can break down several different ways. So those of you that don't know, uh, Moretta and Adrian were classmates at IBC, and so they were in the same class together as students. So does that bond push them through to the end? Chris was, I believe, their advisor or something. I don't know. They haven't really clearly explained that in the footage, and I don't know because I wasn't there.
Yeah.
But Chris works for IBC, and Leah as his husband was. And I know she has taught classes and has worked at IBC too. I don't know exactly the timeline of all of that when it comes to Moretta and Adrian's time there in their class. But obviously, the four of them have that connection. But it seems to me that you could argue Leah is if the IBC best class is gonna hold true, that Leah would be the least connected to that, Chris would be third, and then Moretta and Adrian should be, in theory, the two closest because they were students together. But then on top of that, you have Chris and Leah being a married couple. So, what do you think logically should hold true and push some group to the three?
Yeah. I think if the girls are smart, Chris knows it already. They're coming for him, and that makes the most sense to me. He's been the biggest threat. And I feel like both those girls realize if we take Leah to the finale, we can convince the jury that we should win, right?
Mhm.
That to me makes the most sense. Now, it just it depends on who wins the immunity. Now, what happens if
Mhm.
Chris wins the immunity
Yeah.
challenge, right?
Yeah.
Now, who flips on who? Is Leah the odd one out? I don't know if they necessarily see it that way.
Yeah.
And now Chris has a lot of power
Yeah.
because Chris has the necklace, and he's like, "Well, I'm not voting my wife out, and she's not voting, uh,
So it's 2-2,
herself out."
potentially.
So they can control the vote. They could say, "Hey, Adrian, we're voting Moretta out. You going to vote with us, or you going to vote against us and go to rocks?" And that's where Adrian's gonna be like, "Oh yeah, I don't want to do that. I'll vote Moretta." So I think that could really change things up. But if Chris loses, then I think, if I was Leah, I don't know if I would stay with Chris. I know that that's her husband, but like you have to realize like he's probably your biggest threat in this game. And so she probably needs to flip and go with the girls and go back to that alliance she's been building up with Adrian from the beginning of the game. So I think that's kind of how you have to look at it now. Uh, Other than that, I don't really think, I mean, to me, if it's not Chris that is the target, um, it's tough. I think that I would probably say it's got to be either Leah or Moretta. I feel like Adrian's played the quietest of the four, so I feel like she's the safest if she doesn't win immunity.
Yeah. I think I mostly agree. There's a couple of small moments in the last episode or one small moment that is easy to miss because it's on those godforsaken mics that did not work half the time. And I could pick it out, but I'm not sure that anyone else could. And a part of why I could pick it out is I've spent the episodes, by the time they get released, I've watched that footage 10 times. So
Yeah.
I've seen all this stuff over and over. I'm reading lips, I'm going through everything. So there's a moment where Chris is talking to Leah on the side of the barn, and he's basically like, "Are you guys gonna vote me off? Like, you're gonna turn on me, aren't you, at some point? Like, right? Like he's like acting very worried about it. He's like, next round you guys are gonna vote me out. Like, and then Moretta walks over and Leah says to her something like, I haven't talked to you yet. Let's go talk. They walk away and Leah says, Chris is still worried that we're gonna turn on him. And she says, maybe we should. And so there's that. I will
Yeah.
say the other side of the coin is Moretta in confessionals and in the game has been hardcore, best class strong, and in her mind, what she's been saying that best class means is Adrian, Moretta, and Chris,
Mm.
not Adrian, Moretta, Chris, and Leah. Adrian, Moretta, and Chris. And I think that that in Moretta's head, Leah was the fourth because they needed other people, and it made sense to have Leah. But if Moretta is going to stay best class strong, Leah is the vote for Moretta. It just depends. She has had shown no signs of voting for Chris. In fact, shows Chris her advantage. No one knows about it except for Chris. Like Chris seems like her number one, not Adrian, which actually makes sense in the game, given that they're on the first starting tribe and all of that.
Mhm.
Outside of the game, it might be different, but in the game, it seems like Chris is her number one ally. And so, what will she realize? And maybe she's just been saying this, and the whole time her plan has been to vote him off at four, and she's just been saying and saying, I just, I want to stay true to him or whatever. And but in the back of her head, she's thinking, I'll vote him off at four. That's a pretty dangerous game to play because he's been winning challenges, and you knew he was good at challenges anyways because he won the returning player challenge, and he clutched that swap tribe challenge with the badminton rackets. Like there's been all kinds of signs that he could have a run like this. Um, and so she like if that's her plan, that's a risky plan. Is my point. A
Yeah.
very risky plan.
Well, just go back to last episode, right? She steals Cameron's vote. She
Yeah.
knows Leah has the idol, and she still puts a vote on her. That
Hmm.
was really weird strategy to me. It didn't make really any sense.
Well, it's because Leah's on the outside of that
But what's the
group
point of
to
playing a
Moretta.
what's the point of playing on extra like to me it almost felt like she didn't realize that she could write the same name down for the vote.
Maybe.
And that's to me what it felt like because she was like, well, I'm gonna write Cameron and then I'm gonna write Leah. She's making me nervous, something like that.
Yeah.
So
Well, I think that it was something along the lines of like realizing that the couple of Leah and Chris could be a problem down the road, which is
yeah.
only one more vote. But like if that's an actual concern for you, then what you're saying by voting Leah is, I'm concerned that somebody else might have Chris's vote instead of me. Not that I want to get Chris out, but
Right.
that I want to have Chris on my side,
Yeah.
which is not, as we've been saying, Chris is the front runner. That's not the best strategy if you want to win the game, is to take
Yeah.
the number one player to the end. So we're gonna have to see what happens and if she is going to make that mistake and commit to that mistake or
Hmm.
if something changes before then. But yeah, I think that you may be right that she didn't know she could vote for the same name twice. I'm absolutely positive that I said that at some point in the day, but whether or not I said it every time someone uses steal a vote is probably unlikely. So I wouldn't totally blame her if she just kind of like got it mixed up in her head and didn't know how to do it. But if I'm Leah, that reveals something that she
Hmm.
chose to vote for you out of the options. Instead of putting two on Cameron or instead of putting one on Adrian, she couldn't put it on Chris because he had immunity. But to choose Leah over Adrian or even putting two on Cameron tells Leah something. It has
Yeah.
to, right? So
I mean, if I was Leah, I would be like, why did I get a vote there? I had my idol. We all said the
yeah,
vote was going to be Cameron. Cameron knew it was going to be him. So why would you throw one on me? Like, who did that? Was it Adrian? Right?
yeah,
Obviously, we know it's not Cameron because he got his
he
vote
could not
stolen.
vote. Yeah.
So I don't know. I just thought it was a really like interesting play. It didn't make a whole lot of sense to me, but I want to give her the benefit of the doubt because if she wasn't aware of the rules, that makes sense. But I will say this for anybody that's watching that's going to be a future player that's never played before. If you're not sure about the rules, don't be afraid to ask. It's
Ask
better
us
to ask
questions. Yeah,
instead of
I
just
just think
assume.
like that happened with Drew and the giving up the necklace. I just think that like a lot of times they get caught up in the day, they get caught up in like the ideas and don't stop to think like maybe I should check on this before I am breaking a rule. And it's a symptom of having non-fans be players that haven't ever played before coming to a game. And so, I think that like if you wanted to talk about the overall idea of the season, I think that like having a newbie season with multiple different kinds of advantages, and we even had the game scripted to where you could have had a safety without power advantage come into play. To have four different, and that never ended up happening just because of the way that it worked, based off of the criteria. We had different stipulations that had to be met for different advantages to come into the game through Advantage Island. And so the criteria for safety without power to become a part of the game was never met. So that never came into the game. But we could have had four different advantages in a season with no hardcore fans of Survivor, and only three or four casual fans, and no one that had played before. That probably wasn't the best idea. It probably was. It probably should have been a little bit more simple, by the book, straightforward. Um, Something that I think I learned something every time we do this. So it's something that I
Hmm.
learned is like keep it simple for especially for newbie players. Focus more on helping them understand the conversations that should be happening and the strategy that should be happening, and not worry so much about idols and twists and fun stuff. Like, yeah, you probably have idols because it's just fun to have something in the game, but do you need to have three or four different advantages into a game with all newbies? Probably not. So that's something that that's part of why I think overall Advantage Island didn't work the way that I wanted it to,
For
did
sure.
not have the effect that I wanted, the impact that I wanted it to have. It's fun to try it out. It ended up just being more work for you and I, and the juice wasn't worth the squeeze in the long run, but we learned something. So, uh, yeah. But when it comes to next week, I think there's literally, I think all four of them. There's arguments to be made for why. There's arguments to be made for why League is voted off if the best class sticks together, right? There's arguments for why Chris could get voted off because he's the biggest threat, in my opinion. For Adrian and for Moretta, it's a little bit more shaky just because they seem to be the third and fourth threats. And if Moretta is so loyal, it stays loyal to Chris, then I don't see why Chris would want to turn on her. Even though Adrian, you said, was the quietest, that's the part that I didn't totally agree with, is that if Moretta stays loyal to Chris, then Adrian can be the one that gets voted off. Because why would Chris turn on Moretta?
Hmm.
Uh, if she's loyal, unless Adrian wins immunity. So that's the thing, is like the immunity can change all of it, because if Chris wins immunity, Leo wins immunity, Adrian wins immunity, or Merida wins immunity, it changes the options by 25%. And it seems to me that really I could see the path for any of the four of them to get voted off.
Yeah, no, I definitely think that this is, up for grabs. I'm excited to see who pulls it out in the end. If I were to guess, I would say that I think Chris is the most likely to win the challenge. And
Well, he
based on
won
how
three in a
we,
row, or two in
yeah,
a row,
and,
however many
and
it's
if,
been.
if it's not Chris, my money would probably be on Adrian because Adrian's been the second closest on almost every of the other challenges. So
Sure.
if Moretta or Aaliyah can win, I think that really changes things a little bit and makes it more interesting. But, we've done a good job of kind of articulating why we think each player should win, right? Like their path to victory. The
Yeah.
big thing is, will these players, when they get to the final three, be able to articulate to the jury why
Yeah.
they should be the sole survivor? And I think that's where it's going to be interesting because we've had time to kind of sit through and gather our thoughts and think about it. But these players
Sure.
have been doing this all in one day. And so they might not know everything that's happened, or they might have forgot a move they made or how it impacted the game. So it'll all just really be interesting to see how they kind of portray their game to the jury and see how the jury receives it, because I think that's what ultimately matters here is how is this jury going to respond? We acted like they weren't going to be bitter, which I think is the case. So now it's just who can tell their story of why they should win the best.
Yeah, and I think that we've seen it in the past where, I mean, season one, I would argue that it was a bitter jury was a part of it, but also John, I don't think, made the optimal case in his favor and against the people that he was sitting next to. And then your season was season two. I don't think that Michael made the best case. I think that Chris made the best case out of the three, and then also he had help from the jury.
Yes, he
He
did.
had Cassie on the jury, was very much like he deserves to win. I think that if Michael had done a better job of presenting his case to win, he could have maybe scooped up those bitter votes and won outright instead of tying. Maybe you disagree, but I think that like if
Well,
he
the
had,
problem there is because he played his idol for Brooke to get Jordan out of the game.
mhm,
And then Jordan was upset and his wife Katrina who got
Yeah.
voted out very early in the game, they were like, we're not voting for either Chris or Michael
Yeah.
because, Jacob was the only one that didn't betray us. So we're going to vote for him. And it's like, what does
Yeah.
he deserve votes for? I'm not sure. I think Noah voted for Jacob as well.
Yes. So, but like even just scooping up Noah, that's all it takes,
Yeah.
right? So, and then it maybe it's an impossible situation for Michael, but it seemed like there's potentially, because it's 4-4-3, one vote changes everything. So, and then in season 3, it was pretty open and shut. I don't think that like there's any issues around pleading your case to the jury. Eric won in a pretty strong victory. I don't remember the vote numbers, but it was pretty lopsided. And then last season, the vote was lopsided. However, the behind the scenes of all of that was that Rebecca had a real chance, I think, to win the game if she had been able to plead her case. There were several people who would have liked to voted for her, and that wouldn't were hesitant to vote for Erica, based off lots of different things. I don't want to spend the time to get through all that right now, but there was definitely a potential for a path for Rebecca to make it close, if not win. And she, and no disservice to her, like it's a long day, and that season specifically was cold and rainy and a rough time. So I don't fault her for being too exhausted to be able to like really fully articulate her game. That's part of what happened. So we'll have to see this season. It might just come down to like out of the three of them who presents their case the best, even if we don't agree, or even if other people that are watching don't agree with the outcome. There is a chance that like just who pleads the case the best, because like we've said, it does seem like Chris is the front runner. But after that, like I think that Leah, and I presented Leah's case kind of, but with Adrian and Moretta winning a key immunity next week or making a big vote to vote Chris off or something like that could change the whole perception of all of this and make it more or less anyone's game to some extent. Outside of, I mean, I still think that like logically thinking, if Chris is in the game, no matter what happens, it's probably his win. But I think that any of the three of them can increase or decrease their game resume enough if they can present it to the jury.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree. I think it's going to be interesting to see. And ladies and gentlemen, the finale will be here. It's going to be
Next
great.
week.
We're going to have a fun time watching these 4 players battle it out for the sole survivor of Season 5 at Advantage Island. So, we definitely had some ups and downs this season with gameplay and how we impacted the game with Advantage Island and things like that. But I think overall, we've let the players figure this out on their own. And I think that the 4 best players in every aspect of the game, in my opinion, made it to the Final 4, which I don't know if that's necessarily been the case for every season that we've done.
Yeah.
But I will say, like, these 4, in my opinion, have done the best job overall with alliances, social strategy, and even in challenges. They've all had their moments. Like, probably Leah, not as much in challenges, but everything else she's been really good at. So,
yeah,
nothing against anybody else that played this game, but I think you could take some notes from how these 4 played and say, okay,
sure.
well, I could take some aspects of Chris's game and Adrian's game and Leah's game and Moretta's game and build my resume or build my case for how to win this game if I were to play again.
Definitely. And so we'll get the finale next week, Sunday, November 24th, Thanksgiving week. Show it to your families. You can eat your turkey and put it on the TV. Watch the game.
There you go.
Subscribe to the YouTube channel. Follow us on Facebook. All the good stuff.
Leave your predictions for the winner.
Leave your predictions here. It's going to be a big episode. It's probably going to be the longest of the season, or I would expect, or at least very close. So get ready.
Get your popcorn, ladies and gentlemen. Put some butter, put some salt on it. Kick back, relax, get in some comfy clothes, and just watch these 4 players entertain you for the next 30-plus minutes on our finale.
Probably. All right.
All right.
Let's do it.
See y'all.